Dharma is the ultimate purpose that is working in ourself. When any wrong is done, we say that Dharma is violated, meaning that the lie has been given to our true nature. But this Dharma, which is the truth in us, is not apparent, because it is inherent. So much so that it has been held that sinfulness is the nature of man, and only by the special grace of God can a particular person be saved. This is like saying that the nature of the seed is to remain enfolded within its shell, and it is only by some special miracle that it can be grown into a tree. But do we not know that the appearance of the seed contradicts its true nature? When you submit it to chemical analysis, you may find in it carbon and proteid, and a good many other things, but not the idea of a branching tree. Only when the tree begins to take shape do you come to see its Dharma, and then you can affirm without doubt that the seed which has been wasted and allowed to rot in the ground has been thwarted in its Dharma, in the fulfillment of its true nature. In the history of humanity we have known the living seed in us to sprout. We have seen the great purpose in us taking shape in the lives of our greatest men, and have felt certain that though there are numerous individual lives that seem ineffectual, still it is not their Dharma to remain barren, but it is for them to burst their cover and transform themselves into a vigorous spiritual shoot, growing up into the air and light, and branching out in all directions. The freedom of the seed is in the attainment of its Dharma, its nature and destiny of becoming a tree. It is the non-accomplishment which is its prison. The sacrifice by which a thing attains its fulfillment is not a sacrifice which ends in death. It is the casting off of bonds which wins freedom. When we know the highest ideal of freedom which a man has, we know his Dharma, the essence of his nature, the real meaning of his self. At first sight, it seems that man counts that as freedom by which he gets unbounded opportunities of self-gratification and self-aggrandizement. But surely this is not borne out by history. Our revelatory men have always been those who have lived the life of self-sacrifice. The higher nature in man always seeks for something which transcends itself, and yet is its deepest truth, which claims all its sacrifice, yet makes this sacrifice its own recompense. This is man's Dharma, man's religion, and man's self is the vessel, which is to carry this sacrifice to the altar. We can look at our self in its two different aspects, the self which displays itself, and the self which transcends itself and thereby reveals its own meaning. To display itself, it tries to be big, to stand upon the pedestal of its accumulations, and to retain everything to itself. To reveal itself, it gives up everything it has, thus becoming perfect, like a flower that has blossomed out from the bud, pouring from its chalice of beauty all its sweetness. The lamp contains its oil, which it holds securely in its close grasp, and guards from the least loss. Thus is it separate from all other objects around it, and is miserly. But when lighted, it finds its meaning at once. Its relation with all things far and near is established, and it freely sacrifices its fund of oil to feed the flame. Such a lamp is our self. So long as it hoards its possession, it keeps itself dark. Its conduct contradicts its true purpose. When it finds illumination, it forgets itself in a moment, holds the light high, and serves it with everything it has. For therein is its revelation. This revelation is the freedom which Buddha preached. He asked the lamp to give up its oil. But purposeless giving up is a still darker poverty which he never could have meant. The lamp must give up its oil to the light, and thus set free the purpose it has in its hoarding. This is emancipation. The path Buddha pointed out was not merely the practice of self-abnegation, but the widening of love. And therein lies the true meaning of Buddha's preaching. When we find that the state of nirvana preached by Buddha is through love, then we know for certain that nirvana is the highest culmination of love. For love is an end unto itself. Everything else raises the question, why, in our mind, and we require a reason for it. But when we say, I love, then there is no room for the why. It is the final answer in itself. Doubtless, even selfishness impels one to give away, but the selfish man does it on compulsion. That is like plucking fruit when it is unripe. You have to tear it from the tree and bruise the branch. But when a man loves, giving becomes a matter of joy to him, like the tree's surrender of the ripe fruit. All our belongings assume a weight by the ceaseless gravitation of our selfish desires. We cannot easily cast them away from us. They seem to belong to our very nature, to stick to us as a second skin, and we bleed as we detach them. But when we are possessed by love, its force acts in the opposite direction. The things that closely adhered to us lose their adhesion and weight, and we find that they are not of us. Far from being a loss to give them away, we find in that the fulfillment of our being. Thus we find in perfect love the freedom of ourself. That only which is done for love is done freely, however much pain it may cause. Therefore, working for love is freedom in action. This is the meaning of the teaching of disinterested work in the Gita. The Gita says action we must have, for only in action do we manifest our nature. But this manifestation is not perfect so long as our action is not free. In fact, our nature is obscured by work done by the compulsion of want or fear. The mother reveals herself in the service of her children, so our true freedom is not the freedom from action, but freedom in action, which can only be attained in the work of love. God's manifestation is in his work of creation, and it is said in the Upanishad, knowledge, power, and action are of his nature. They are not imposed upon him from outside. Therefore, his work is his freedom, and in his creation he realizes himself. The same thing is said elsewhere in other words. From joy does spring all this creation. By joy is it maintained, towards joy does it progress, and into joy does it enter. It means that God's creation has not its source in any necessity, it comes from his fullness of joy. It is his love that creates, therefore in creation is his own revealment. The artist who has a joy in the fullness of his artistic idea objectifies it and thus gains it more fully by holding it afar. It is joy which detaches ourselves from us, and then gives it form in creations of love in order to make it more perfectly our own. Hence there must be this separation, not a separation of repulsion, but a separation of love. Repulsion has only the one element, the element of severance. But love has two, the element of severance, which is only an appearance, and the element of union, which is the ultimate truth. Just as when the father tosses his child up from his arms, it has the appearance of rejection, but its truth is quite the reverse. So we must know that the meaning of ourself is not to be found in its separateness from God and others, but in the ceaseless realization of yoga, of union, not on the side of the canvas where it is blank, but on the side where the picture is being painted. This is the reason why the separateness of ourself has been described by our philosophers as Maya, as an illusion, because it has no intrinsic reality of its own. It looks perilous. It raises its isolation to a giddy height and casts a black shadow upon the fair face of existence. From the outside it has an aspect of a sudden disruption, rebellious and destructive. It is proud, domineering, and wayward. It is ready to rob the world of all its wealth to gratify its cravings of a moment, to pluck with a reckless, cruel hand all the plumes from the divine bird of beauty, to deck its ugliness for a day.